through a short list of things that I wanted to be when I was growing up. I promise I won't list all of them. But when I was a young, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I wanted to be a firefighter. My father had a friend who worked in the Indianapolis Fire Department, and at one point he gave to us one of the old fire helmets that had been retired from circulation. And so my brothers and I would ride around the neighborhood putting out fake fires, fighting over who got to wear the fire helmet. And I wanted to be a firefighter. When I was a little bit older and I began to see my grandfather and my dad at family gatherings. They were both teachers, high school teachers and high school football coaches, and discuss plays and draw things up. And I didn't know anything about what they were talking about, but I got to sit in and listen. And I wanted to be, after watching two heroes talk about these things, I wanted to be a teacher and a football coach. A couple of years later, I realized that I liked and was good at math, and I liked to build things, like to build dams out in the woods and build forts and huts and all these other things and take apart electronics. And so I had decided that I wanted to be an engineer. And I liked Purdue University, and so that's what they were good at. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do when I was in grade school. A little bit older, I began to fall in love with film and movies. I liked soundtracks and acting, and I wondered how they edited it all together and put it together. And I had a desire to and a love for film and wanted to work in the film industry. When I was in college, I was majoring in math, but I came across I had to take a class in psychology, and I loved it so much I almost switched my major to psychology. I thought long and hard about becoming a psychologist and working with people and trying to help them in that area, particularly as my grandmother at that same time was diagnosed with clinical depression. And I think underlying all of that throughout most of my life, I wanted to be a father. Growing up as the oldest of 11 kids, there was a desire. I saw how much fun and life there was in a family, although sometimes growing up as the oldest of 11, I didn't want to have kids. The vast majority of time, that was a goal as well in my life. Now, when you list all of those off, of course, it's impossible to do all of those things. To be a firefighting, football coaching, high school teaching, engineering person working in Hollywood while also being a psychologist. That's not really possible. But I'd like to go back through that list and share with you what happened to me when I became a priest. Again, as I heard the call to the priesthood, I felt initially sadness that, of course, none of those things would probably be a part of the path. But I heard the call to the priesthood. I heard the call from Christ to leave my nets and follow Christ, become a priest. And here's the interesting thing that happened. I'd like to go back through that list, and I have a couple of props. First of all, with regards to firefighting and the fire helmet that Rick Lintner gave us when I was about 4 years old. This was a fire helmet that I got in my first year as a priest when I was asked to be the chaplain of the Brownsburg Fire Department. I got to go out on runs. I got to help out in situations and be there for both the people that were victims of fires and had lost loved ones, to be there for the firefighters themselves and to counsel them at the firehouse. I was invited into a lot of their meals and stuff. Got to be with them for that. Got to work out with them. They had a real nice workout facility, so sometimes I would work out with them. I had no idea, but I became a firefighter as a priest. And this is my helmet, and I keep it. If anyone knows anyone in the Greencastle Fire Department, I'm available. As a teacher and a coach, I've shared that many times as well. Obviously, as a priest, I was invited and asked in my first assignment to do both of those things, to teach and to coach football. With regards to engineering, I also brought a prop. This is my engineering helmet that I got for our construction project over at Annunciation. I'm hoping that I'll get another one here at St. Paul's. It had my name on the front of it, and I had an engineering helmet. And I didn't, of course, wasn't actually making any major drawings or anything along those lines, thanks be to God, but was asked to look over plans and look at electrical drawings and architecture drawings and plumbing drawings and heating and air conditioning drawings. And because I had the drafting and some of that engineering experience and a small little internship as an engineer, that helped me a lot, and I felt like I got to be, in some small way, an engineer at Annunciation. And I'm sure as a priest that'll probably happen many times throughout my priesthood. With regards to working in film, it came sort of dropped into my path, so to speak, a couple of different opportunities as a priest to work with some different Catholic film companies to work on some projects that, at least in the Catholic world, have been fairly significant and I believe helpful to people. We actually have one coming out in a couple of weeks, working on my day off with about a coach that I had that we're hoping to use to inspire other coaches around the country to coach for Christ as he did. And so I got to work in film. As a psychologist, I'm not a psychologist, but I use and feel like I've been blessed with plenty of opportunities to use that passion and that love as well. Counseling people almost every day in some way or another. And again, we're not psychologists, but there's a lot of crossover between the psychiatry and psychology fields and the priesthood. We oftentimes refer those that come to us if they need a psychologist or a psychiatrist. We refer them on, and having a working knowledge of some of the basics is really helpful as a priest, and I get to use that. But again, there's this back and forth between the two, the science and the faith aspect of mental health, and so blessed and feel like I get to use that, and all of the things that I read and began studying just in an introductory way have really helped me as a priest. And then finally on that list, the vocation of a father. I can tell you in 8.5 years as a priest, I've never woken up one morning and thought, I don't have any children. Because I feel like I'm blessed with lots of young people in my life that in some way, although not obviously their biological father, I'm still asked to be a father too, and to all the parishioners, all the people in some way, to teach and to be present to and to care for. And again, I've never once felt like I didn't have any children. And so I list all of that for a couple of reasons. First of all, one reason I share those stories with you is to say that we are all in that position that Andrew and Peter and the other apostles in the gospel today, we're all in that situation where we're standing on the shore and Christ is saying, let down your nets, drop your nets, and follow me. I've got a new thing. There's something I'm asking you to do. To come with me and fish for people, right? We're all in that. We're all asked that. We all hear that on our hearts, that invitation to do that. And what I hope that you hear is that not just in becoming a priest, but in any time we do that, any time we say, Lord, I will follow you, what happens is that all those things that we were afraid we were going to lose by following Christ, all the things that we think, wow, if I do that, I might lose this or that thing will be taken away, or that thing will be taken away. God gives it a million. It's impossible. It would have been impossible for me to be a firefighting, football coaching, high school teaching, engineering, film industry psychologist father if I became a priest. That's the only way that it ever could have even happened. And when I go back 15 years, there was no way in my mind. I thought when I called to be a priest, all that's gone. All those other dreams, and there was the sadness aspect to that, right? All these things are going to be gone. I trust people obviously not going to abandon me, but again, there was a sadness. And then what happened in following Christ? They're all given back. They're all given back to me as a priest. And so I hope that inspires in your state in life. That's not what God doesn't just, bless or treat people who become priests, of course. He blesses, bestows these gifts on all of us when we follow and do what it is that Christ is asking of us. Become people who go out and fish for others, and become a fisher of other people as Christ is inviting us to do that. But there's another reason that I share my story with you today, and I want to also think about this. If we are asked to go out and fish for other people by Christ, I want to suggest that the only hook left in our tackle box for fishing anymore in our culture is our stories, right? My story, a lot of times in the homily, I share a story of some kind from my own life. Why? Because a lot of times that's the only thing left that we have to go out and bring the good news to people, right? I remember over the past several years, we've had several Christ Renews His Parish retreats, and what, if you've not been on that, what happens is parishioners throughout the weekend give their own testimonies. They share their story with other people that are on the retreat. And I'll tell you, I've heard some of them, and some people have even come and said, Father, could I read or share my story with you so that I can get some feedback? Or, as I put this together, it was good and refreshing. I want to share it with someone, or it was challenging. I want to share that with you. So absolutely, I hear these reflections, or I hear them on the retreats. They are unbelievable. And I tell everybody, I'm like, you need to tell other people that. You need to share that story with everyone else that you can think of, in ways that you can think of, however it is that's best to do that. But here's the thing, a lot of times when I say that to people, they say back to me, oh, Father, no, it's too personal, or, I'm afraid of what would happen, etc. There's a lot of things that people say, I don't want to share my story with people. But I would, again, like to suggest that our stories are the last thing we have at our disposal to go out into that ocean that people find themselves in, of despair, of loneliness, of isolation, of suffering. The last thing that we have that will actually work at speaking to them and going out and fishing for them is your story. Your story. If you got up and told, hey, I heard an interesting story from our priest this weekend, they'd be like, yeah, tuning out, right? But if they hear your story about what Christ has done for you in your life, that's the thing that gives us an avenue into people's hearts. A lot of times, everything else that maybe we've done in the past or tried in the past, and the ways in which we've reached out to people in our culture have hardened their hearts to that. If you go up to somebody and say, hey, can I read the Bible with you? They're going to run away. And if you tell them you want to read the Catechism to them, they're going to sprint away. Right? We've hardened our hearts in many ways. We're so used to it, or we've heard it so many times, or maybe we've heard it from people who were insincere and didn't mean it. Right? We've blocked all those out. And working with our college students and being on campus and lots of other, you're there too. You're out in the public. People do not hear that anymore. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear you read from the Bible. They don't want to hear you talk about the church. They don't want to hear you read the Catechism. The last thing that will not get shut down in public places in our culture right now is if you stand up and say, I'd like to tell my story. Because here's why. No one will stand up and say, that's not your story. We're still trained, and we still know, and we still respect one another's stories. And we want to hear them, right? We want to hear them. People want to hear stories. And so I think that I just want you to maybe you're afraid of your story. Maybe you haven't ever shared it. Maybe you haven't written it down. There's people in your life, in your sphere of influence, that are a part of your life that you can share your story with. Maybe it's a conversation at a restaurant with them, one-on-one. Maybe it's waiting in line in the school pickup line. Maybe it's an email to a family. Maybe it's a letter. Whatever it is, however it is, we need to be people who are telling our stories to our families and friends and our loved ones and everyone else that we can think of a way to get our story to them. Because I'm telling you, it will change people. It brings people, it fishes them out of where it is that they find themselves in at the moment. And it'll just end on this one sort of image or maybe a way to wrap this up. The bishops of the United States are asking us to focus on two things this particular week, these past few days, and going into this week. The bishops of the U.S. are asking us to spend a week praying for Christian unity And they're also, of course, we're in the midst of praying for greater respect for human life as tomorrow is the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. Those two things are really hard. To work at, in some way, Christian unity is intimidating to most people, Catholic, non-Catholic, wherever we're at on that spectrum of our Christian faith. To think about working at unity, we're like, you want me to work at the thing that people have been working at for 500 years? You know, you want me to work at that? That seems intimidating. Or you want me to go out into and try to do something or work at the abortion issue or raising the level of respect for life in our country? But these two examples are both ways in which I think we see the power of story, right? When we think about Christian unity, the thing that, and I've been involved in relationships with ministers from other denominations, the way to engaging dialogue, good conversation, friendship, is by sharing my story with them and inviting them to share their story with me. So instead of saying, oh, so you're Anglican, can I argue with you about purgatory? You know, I want to, dialogue about some theological topic. It's much easier to just say, I'd like to share with you the story of what my Catholic faith has done for me. And they want to hear that most of the time. They want to hear that. People want to hear that. They love hearing that. And then inviting them to say, what has your Lutheran faith done for you? I'd love to hear that. Right? That is the path. That's the way that we move forward on this issue of Christian unity. Not by starting with some sort of dogma or controversial topic that's really hard for people, that people have been arguing and discussing for many years, but by sharing our stories with each other. And the same thing goes for the abortion issue and the respect life issue. Tomorrow in Indianapolis, we will have a Mass with Archbishop Thompson and then go down to the State House, have a short little march. Anyone is welcome to come. Mass is at noon. But speaking at that is going to, after the Mass, at the rally, is Abby Johnson, who used to work in a Planned Parenthood clinic until she saw her first ultrasound during an abortion. And she ran out and has been pro-life and working in the pro-life cause ever since. Her story changes people. When she tells her story, there's not a dry eye in the room. And hearts are open to hearing that message. Even people maybe who were not as open to it if you just started talking about things theoretically. So you have a story, and it is a great way to fish for people, which is exactly what Christ is asking us to do every day. We prayed today for the courage not just to know and understand our story, but to have the courage to share it with others.